All right. Good morning, everybody. What's going on? Hope you guys had a great weekend. Of course, I'm Perry White here with On the Yard Network. We're going to recap some SEC baseball over the weekend, opening weekend and SEC play, conference play. So we get a chance to look around the conference, look at some of the top 25 matchups that happened. My man, Zach McKinnell from FCS Football Central is going to join me. We're going to look over the weekend, man. Some great series. Some of these games went down to the wire all across the South. And of course, across SEC, a lot of states, Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas, Louisiana dealt with, as well as Tennessee, severe weather over the weekend. So, prayers to all the families that were affected by that. So I hope anybody that's watching this, that you weren't affected. But if you know anyone that was, trust me, our prayers are with you guys. But top 25 matchups all across the SEC. And we're going to recap them once my man Zach gets on and join me. And we're going to get it rocking and rolling. So you guys just bear with me. Give me a second. And then we're going to get things up and ready and good to go. Let's see. Hope your team won. It's a good weekend. Listen, I'm talking about some great baseball being played. Top 25 matchups. You look at LSU versus Missouri and one. Missouri pushed LSU pretty tough. You look at Arkansas and Ole Miss, just to name some. Alabama, Texas A&M. Just some great matchups across the country and across the South. So once my man Zach gets on, we're going to talk about it. We'll get it rocking and rolling. And I must do some housekeeping and share this in some groups. Let's see. Let's see. Hope everybody enjoyed the weekend. St. Patrick's Day parade, a lot of places over the weekend. Let's see. I'm just waiting on my man Zach to jump in and join us, and then we're going to rock and roll, talk some SEC baseball. Big weekend across the South when you're looking at SEC baseball, the teams, top 25 matchups all over the place, some great ball being played. Let's see. And of course, if you haven't done so already, man, look, you can go follow On the Yard Network. We're across all social media. We're on X, formerly as Twitter. We're on Facebook, of course, where we're doing the live. We're on YouTube. Be sure to go hit that subscribe button and many other places. I'm Perry White. I host the Jaguar Journal on 107.3 FM in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Particularly, I cover SWAC, HBCU, MEAC, football, sports, everything you can ask for. Let's see. Here goes Zach. Let's get him on. Zach, what's going on?
What's up, man? You got me?
Hey, give me 1 second. All right. Can you hear me?
Yep. Got you loud and clear, man.
What's going on, Zach?
Man, not much. Trying to keep up with all the sports going on right now, man, between baseball, March Madness, getting ready for spring football. We got everything going on right now.
March Madness is upon us. Teams punch their tickets in this past week into the NCAA tournament. So it's definitely, look, we're going to have to do something to get us a bracket going, man.
I'm telling you, an on the yard bracket challenge or something like that.
Yeah, look, last year I was pretty good when I got down to the Elite Eight on both the men and the women's side. So I'm going to try to see if I can keep it going this year, man.
You see, for some reason, I guess it's because the lack of, Cinderella stories on the women's side. My women's bracket's always immaculate, right? Because listen, you get free points, right? UConn, South Carolina, USC going to be in the Final Four or the Elite Eight. But in the men's bracket, man, you're going to have like a Grand Canyon or VCU or someone just wreak havoc on my bracket. I'm trying to prepare for it. Or McNeese potentially. You're always going to have a school like that kills everyone's bracket.
Yeah, Will Wade doing a hell of a job over at McNeese. Of course, he was at LSU, but now getting a chance to show his coaching ability even at a smaller level right now at McNeese State and winning the conference, winning the Southland, and taking the team. Man, they could be a Cinderella team.
Yeah, I was a little bit surprised LSU, hasn't tried to spin the block yet on Wade, man, with how bad LSU basketball's been. You got him there at McNeese. McNeese has been arguably a better program than LSU the past 2 years. At some point, you wonder if LSU's just kind of gearing up to make a run at him, maybe after this next season.
I'm curious to see that. I don't think they're gonna double the block, man. I think that was that one time and one time only with them, considering everything that they were dealing with. But I'm interested to see, Blue. I am interested to see what they do with the situation because, of course, LSU was one of the teams who opted out of, and South Carolina opted out of not participating in the NIT this year.
Yeah, it was kind of it was an interesting decision. There was a lot of teams that have just decided not to participate, I guess, in the NIT and these other brackets. But Perry, I mean, we cover a lot of FCS football as well. It's kind of the same argument, right? That you don't get a big payout, you got to pay for your own travel. That there's just not it's not a lot of money in those extra tournaments outside of the NCAA tournament. So I think it's just schools being financially savvy, especially with the house settlement and other things coming down the pipeline too, that kind of bring a whole lot of uncertainty to the future of college
And
athletics.
as we get things going, good morning to everybody who's tuning in. I'm Perry White, my man Zach McKinnell. We're going to recap the weekend of SEC baseball. It was opening weekend of SEC conference play. Hey, and if y'all got to give me, I call him Blue, right? We got a nickname, he Blue, but his name is Zach McKinnell. Blue, let everybody know, first of all, where they can keep up and find you who tuning in.
Yeah, you can find me on the Blue Bloods on YouTube, all podcast streaming platforms, man. Mainly covering FCS football, HBCU football. We talk, college football in general at times as well. Also FCS football on SI, FCS football central on SI, si.com/college/FCS, where you can find probably the best FCS content you can find anywhere in the country, man. You can follow us on that website as well.
All right, Blue, you ready to jump right into this thing,
Yeah,
man?
yeah, let's get it.
All right, opening weekend in SEC conference play, top 25 matchups. And let's start with the top 25 matchup between the number 3 Arkansas Razorbacks Blue and the number 13 Ole Miss Rebels. On Friday, this thing got going, and Ole Miss found a way to get past the Razorbacks 10-6 in this game. Ole Miss with 10 runs, 14, excuse me, with one error in that ball game, 14 hits on the other side for the Razorbacks, who came in flexing their muscles, but found themselves short in this one in the opening week. 6 runs, 10 hits, 1 error in game 1. And then you look over, you transition over to Saturday, right? Arkansas trying to get back on the right track, and they do, Blue. They get the victory 12-3 over Ole Miss. And this one, Arkansas, not only with the 12 runs, but they had 15 hits, 1 error on the other end for Ole Miss. 3 runs, 4 hits, 1 error. And then here we come to Sunday, right? We got to make sure who's going to win the series, who's going to take it all the way home. And you know who did it, Blue? The Razorbacks got it done. As they ended up winning this series 12-9 in this ball game. 12 runs, 16 hits, 1 error on the other side for the Rebels. 9 runs, 10 hits, and 2 errors. Let's start with this one. Number 3 versus number 13. Blue, when you look back at this game, the Razorbacks started that Friday game slow, but they were able to get it done, winning the last 2 and ultimately picking up the first series win of the season in conference play as we get things going, a battle of 2 top 25 teams.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'll say this. I was impressed with Arkansas's ability to bounce back after that Friday loss. I think their bats just got super hot over the weekend, man. They 1 through 9, man, they have guys who can go make plays. And especially that leadoff hitter, Charles, I believe it's DeValian. Man, I mean, listen, just went off this past weekend. Also, Aloy in that lineup hitting 3 home runs in this series. And I'll say this, their pitching rotation is really strong. Listen, we'll talk about a few teams in the league that Perry, I think they're strong when they got their starter, when they got their ace in on Friday. But then when they get through the weekend, it the drop off is really, really big. I think Arkansas, their pitching staff's done a really good job of being pretty consistent. And I think you saw over the weekend, Arkansas got into their comfort zone and their bat teed it up, and you can see how dangerous this team really, really could be. And I think when you look at how they came into the weekend, Perry, as well, man, they were what, 16-1 overall. Only loss was a neutral site loss to Kansas. What was it? I think it was Kansas State, if I'm not mistaken. And man, they got a really, really solid resume. And I think that 12-game win streak coming into this series, you dropped that first one for them to bounce back on Saturday, Sunday was a big one for Arkansas.
Yeah, that one lost to Kansas State 3-2 in that ball game. And that was one of those ones that was played at Globe Life Field up in Arlington, Texas. A battle of two teams. Hey, Kansas State just wanted it more. But you go back and let's look at Arkansas being the number 3 team coming into the season, right? They start the season off with Washington State in a series game, and they won all 4 games against Washington State, winning game 1, 3-2, 14-2, 5-2, and 12-2. Then you talk about on February 21st, that Kansas State loss, that one loss they had. Then they had a great battle against number 22 at the time, TCU. The Razorbacks were able to get it done 2-1 and then getting a victory over Michigan. Grambling 14-3 over Grambling. Then a 3-game weekend series over Charlotte in which they got 11-10, battled back and forth. Charlotte gave the Razorbacks everything they could ask for. 8-5, 4-3. Then you look at ULM, Portland, UCA, and then coming into this weekend, dropping game 1 against Ole Miss, but being able to find a way to get it done on the back end, getting that weekend series. Looking at the Razorback, Coach Van Horn, and listen, the Razorback fans, the way that they've been feeling towards Coach Horn, is like, all right, when are we going to finally get over the hump? Because the Razorbacks over the past, you could say 5, 6 years, really, let's go back a decade, has had a team that's right there in the thick of things, especially competing for the College World Series. You're talking about winning and hosting regionals. They just don't seem to close it out when the time matters on the back end, like you've seen some other teams in the SEC. So I can understand the way the Razorback fans feel as they look at Coach Van Horn, like, all right, Coach, when we gonna finally get over this hump, and when we gonna finally bring on a championship to the back to Fayetteville?
I'll, this will be a recurring theme on this show, Perry. I just don't. I think some fans lose sight at how competitive the SEC really is. I believe in the updated top 25 today. There's what 11 SEC teams, and there's 4 teams in the top 5. Like we got to put it in perspective. I mean, you could be Perry. You could be the 8th best team in the SEC and be a top 20 team nationally. And a contender to get to the College World Series, depending on how the bracket lays out at the end of the year. I think Arkansas fans got to be patient. I think they have the talent to get to the College World Series. And Perry, it's kind of like March Madness when you get to like the Elite Eight, Final Four-ish. If you can get to the College World Series, anything can happen in Omaha.
Anything can happen in Omaha, and we've seen it. Then let's look at Ole Miss, right? The Rebels overall right now, 15-4 on the season, starting the season off with a victory over at the time, number 21, Arizona, getting 2-1. Then they went on to play Texas. They lost 10-0, 7 innings. Took on Clemson, a big one in 7, 15-5. Got a victory over Arkansas State 4-2. You look at it, Arkansas State really pushed them. It took 10 innings for the Rebels to close out against Arkansas State. You look at Eastern Kentucky, they got a victory there in a 3-game series, winning 8-0, 9-4, as well as 9-3. Then took on number 22 Southern Miss at the time. And we've seen traditionally Southern Miss having a team that can really battle. Ole Miss gets the victory 15-8, then getting victories over Wright State in the series, 9-1, 8-3, 7-3. Then taking on that game against Southeastern got canceled. Then they took on Murray State, Jacksonville State, the way they got past Jacksonville State, 7-4, 12-4, and 13-2 in 8 innings. Then lost to South Alabama Blue, and this one 15-5 back on Tuesday, March the 11th, and then coming into this series, they get game one against Arkansas. Looking at the Rebels, that's the top 25 team. They stumbled and bumbled here and there, fumbled a little bit, but at the end of the day, there's still an Ole Miss Rebel team that I think, although they dropped this series with Arkansas in opening week of SEC play, this still a team to watch out for. They're not top 25 for no reason.
Agreed. I just don't know. The one thing I want to see for them is just more consistency. And I think you've kind of mentioned it. Yes, that like they're, came into the weekend, what, 14-2, now lost 4 games. But it's just you see the big win over Clemson, right? Which is one of the best out of conference wins for the SEC. But then you also see a massive loss to South Alabama. And it's just like they have these moments where the team just like if they get super cold with the bats, pitching staff isn't there. It's like, do they have the consistency in a league where Perry any weekend, any game, you can just listen, you can reel off 6 straight losses with the quickness in the SEC if you're not playing well. If the team that showed up against South Alabama shows up, Perry, this can get out of hand quickly. But like you said, I do think they have the talent. They just got to show some more consistency, I think, weekend to weekend, game to game.
Let's move over to another ball game. Texas, number 11, Texas taking on Mississippi State in the weekend series. And we go back and look at Friday's game between Texas and Mississippi State. Texas gets the victory. A close one. Mississippi State pushing far. Texas wins that Friday game 8-7 for the Longhorns in this one. 9 hits, 0 errors on the other end for the Bulldogs. 9 hits, 1 error. Texas gets game one. Then you move over to Saturday and you look at, you say, hey, can Mississippi State get it done against Texas? Can they find a way? Can they figure it out? And listen, Texas is a tough out for anybody. At the end of the day, it does not matter. And I can remember the days of the old school. I don't know if you remember this, Blue, the old school college baseball game that used to be out. Man, Texas was the team that you wanted on there. Texas gets the victory Sunday 4-1 over Mississippi State. 7 hits, 1 error for Texas. On the other end for the Bulldogs, 4 hits, 0 errors. Texas wins this series, man. Looking at Texas, number 11, this is a team that I think as you continue to watch, they're 17-1 on the season currently, 3-0 against Mississippi State, who came in, and that right now they're 13-7, 0-3. A tough start into conference play as Texas swept them. But when you look at Texas right now, the Longhorns are a team to watch out for in their first season in SEC play.
I really like Texas, Perry. I think they're going to be the sleeper in the conference. And the other thing too is if I'm not mistaken, you even mentioned they beat Ole Miss earlier this year on a neutral site.
Mm-hmm.
Got a win over Oklahoma State, Texas Tech. They've got some wins on their resume here, and they lost their first game against Louisville, and now what is it, 17 straight wins
Reeling
for the
them
Longhorns
off.
now? That they've really found their rhythm here, and I think it just speaks to the depth of this team and how consistent they've been since that. I think that first loss to Louisville really woke up this team, and they've locked in since. And I think Mississippi State. I don't think this is the same Mississippi State team that we're accustomed to seeing in the SEC, right? Because
Yeah.
they're usually a perennial power. I think this could be a down year for Mississippi State, so I do want to see what Texas does against Florida, Tennessee, LSU, teams like that. But I do think they're laying the groundwork to be a team that can make a dark horse run. Or, we're way earlier; it's in March, but a dark horse run potentially to the College World Series, depending on how that bracket lays out.
Texas in their first season in SEC play. You talked about it after that first game loss to Louisville, in which they lost in 10 innings, 4-3. They've reeled off 17 victories, as you said. They're 9-0 at home and 3-0 on the road. They're 5-1 at that neutral site. You look at after they took on Louisville, they beat Ole Miss 10-0. They beat number 17 Oklahoma State at the time 14-8. Dartmouth 4-3, 3-2, 4-1. Incarnate Word 6-0. They beat Washington, Texas Tech, and Illinois along the way, getting a victory 15-5 over Texas A&M Corpus Christi. They beat Santa Clara. They added on to it along with UT Arlington, and then getting the weekend victory 8-7, 5-3 and 7 innings, and 4-1 and 7 innings against Mississippi State, man. Texas, listen. I like them. Going back to them back in the day, man, as I said, it's good to see them in SEC play because traditionally we have seen the SEC dominate the world of college baseball. And watching this team transition over into the SEC, I know so many people get caught up in talking about SEC football, but the quiet story is, will Texas be able to come in and have the success early on that we've seen Texas football in SEC the way that can we see Texas baseball come in and sustain and have success in SEC play?
Yeah, I think it says a lot that both Texas and Oklahoma came in and won their first series. Now, I don't think either one played, a perennial power in the SEC, but Texas swept a really good Mississippi State team on the road too. Like that series was in Starkville, and I think Oklahoma was like 1 inning away from choking that away against South Carolina, but that had some late heroics. I think for the new additions in the SEC to have this much success early is
Mm-hmm.
great for the league. Both teams are top 15, if I'm not mistaken, and it just adds to the already deep the depth of this league and how competitive it really is. And it's really good to see Texas and Oklahoma being able to keep up year one in the league.
Uh, Also, looking at you keep it going. You talk about Mississippi State. Mississippi State getting started the season off big against Manhattan, 17-3, 13-1, 5-1. They lost to Southern Miss. Southern Miss got past them. Then they were able to get back on track, beating Missouri State in a 3-game series. They lost to Troy, who at the time Troy was number 21 in the nation, 6-5. They jumped back on track. They beat Rice. Then they lose to Arizona. They lose to Oklahoma State. They come back around the second time around and get a victory over Southern Miss. And then they play Queens, gets victories there. Play Old Dominion, beat them 9-4. Beat Nichols in a tough one, 2-1, before heading into this weekend series with Texas. Looking at this Mississippi State, you just said it. This team is not what we saw before in Mississippi State. They seem to be starting kind of down this year. The question with Mississippi State for me is, will they find a way to get hot once things get going deeper into SEC play?
I just don't know if they have enough this year, to be honest with you, Perry. Do I think they're the worst team in the league? No, I think that's reserved for probably Missouri, South Carolina, someone like that. But they're talented, and they're probably a team that could make a run to to the tournament. But I just I don't see the depth. I don't see the pitching staff being as deep as it once was, and I just don't know if they match up well. Like I think there's a massive gap right between them and not just the top four teams, right? Because I think they're the top four teams are kind of locked in, but even that middle range, the 5 through like 8 to 9, it still looks like there's a little bit of a gap there. I think they fall toward the back of the SEC this year, and they've been tested, but the problem is, Perry, you're going to be tested every week. There's not going to be any off weeks in the SEC this year, so I just don't know if Mississippi State has it this year. I think this is going to be more of a rebuilding year for the Bulldogs.
Rebuilding year for the Bulldogs. They dropped the opening weekend series to Texas as Texas sweeps them out and moves on. All right, let's move on. Let's look at Missouri, right? The Tigers taking on the number one team in the nation, the LSU Tigers. Hey, the Tigers versus the Tigers. Friday, LSU gets it done, 12-5 over Missouri. LSU on this one, 9 hits, 0 errors on the other end for the other Tigers coming out of Missouri. 6 hits, 1 error. Then this thing goes into Saturday, and severe weather, of course, played a factor all across the South, having to change game times. But in game two, listen, this was close. Missouri battled and gave LSU everything they could ask for. The Tigers of LSU gets the victory, 7-6 over Missouri. 8 hits, 0 errors for LSU, the number one team in the nation, and for Missouri on the other end. They had 10 hits, 1 error. LSU gets the victory, 7-6. And then we come down Sunday to the weekend series. And I was over at Alex Box Stadium yesterday, and LSU gets it done, 10-5, getting the weekend series over Missouri, sweeping them out. 14 hits, 1 error. And on the other side for Coach Kerry Jackson and his Missouri Tigers, 7 hits, 0 errors. Looking at this one, LSU doing what LSU does. That's win games in winning fashion at Alex Box Stadium.
I'll say this, man. Coming into the weekend, this was my number one team. I think they got past. They're still two, maybe one B, right? I think there's a team that made a bigger statement than them this weekend. But man, they're so good. Derek Curriel, Jared Jones, those guys are some of the two of the most consistent hitters in the SEC. And LSU's depth at pitching, man. It doesn't matter if it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. It doesn't matter, man. They got guys for every day of the week. And I think too, they've been the most I would say that they've probably been the most consistent team in the SEC this year. And I don't think this was a series, Perry, where they were going to be very tested. I think Saturday they kind of lulled into that just because I just think they knew they were better than Missouri. And I think what they're on a 15 game win streak now. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how this team matches up with those Tennessee, Florida, Texas, and I want to see them tested more. I think this was kind of an appetizer for LSU, and we're really going to see it ramp up here over the next few weeks, man, when they get into some real SEC competition. Teams that they're going to be playing in the College World Series. Because to me, I always hate saying lock period because injuries and anything can happen. But I would be remiss if I don't think LSU is going to be one of those teams that's playing in Omaha this year. That's how good this team is, and I think they are a bona fide national title contender.
Yeah, shaking back from what many would say is a disappointing season last year. They come into the season streaking really hot. Started the season off with victories over Purdue, Fort Wayne. You're talking about game one, 14-0, 10-1, 8-1. Then they had a midweek game against the team right here in Baton Rouge, Southern University. They were in this one in 7 innings, 13-1. The game against Nichols got postponed. Then they had a series against Omaha. Omaha giving them their lone loss on the season, getting them 5-4 in a tough one. But LSU was able to win those other two games, 4-2 as well as 12-1. And they come back and take on Nichols again, gets that opportunity against Nichols 13-3. And then they had hell of a battles over in Texas at Globe Life Field in Arlington against Dallas Baptist, who was the top 25 team at the time. Back and forth that game with LSU pulled it out 7-3. Then Kansas State, the team we talked about, who beat the Razorbacks earlier, getting the season started. LSU finds a way to get it done in 10. That was an intense game. It went back and forth. Both teams didn't want to let it go, but the backs started to work out, and the pitching went downhill for Kansas State in that one as the Tigers got it done 8-5 in 10 innings. They got an 11-6 victory over Nebraska, 12-8 victory over Sam Houston. Then in a weekend series against North Dakota State, a midweek series, with North Dakota State, they win 11-9, 13-3. Then they take on North Alabama and get that one 13-2, 6-2, 11-5. Then last week in the midweek game on Tuesday, Xavier from Ohio comes into Skip Bergman Alex Box Stadium, and LSU gets the victory 18-4 in 7 innings. You're looking at this Tiger baseball team, man. Does LSU seem to be the team to beat in the nation right now? Not only in SEC play, but across the nation right now.
We haven't talked about them yet, but I think there's a team that I'm a little bit higher on right now. And maybe I'm just a prisoner of the moment, Perry, and people can call me on that. I think I think they're a 1B right there behind Tennessee. I think Tennessee checks all the boxes for me right now. And I think this weekend what they did against Florida was was probably the most impressive like 3-day performance I've seen from a team thus far in conference play just started. So I think it's them in Tennessee, and I think that I don't know, do they play this year in the regular season? I want to say they do, but man, if Tennessee LSU is the game I want to see personally this year. Yeah, they play the end of April, April 25th through the 27th in Baton Rouge. Tennessee comes to town. That's going to be the series, in my opinion, that determines which team I like to as a national title favorite. But both teams, man, it's hard to find a weakness on either one of them, man. They are the two most talented teams in college baseball right now.
Let's look at the Missouri Tigers, right? Coach Kerry Jackson trying to get things going, came over from Memphis, former coach at Southern University, turned that program around at Southern, then goes to Memphis and has success. And now trying to help a struggling baseball squad up at Missouri. They're 8-11 on the season. They start the season off with losing to Penn State. They got victory over UConn. They lost to Stenson. They lost to UCF. And then they went down into Vero Beach, Florida, in the Andre Dawson Classic against some great HBCU talent. They beat Florida A&M 6-5 and then lost to Alabama State, who was a perennial power coming out of the Southwestern Athletic Conference, the SWAC. Alabama State got it done big against Missouri 10-2. Then they wrapped up that Andre Dawson Invitational with a 15-3 victory over Coach Jackson's former team, Southern University. They go on to beat Lindenwood 14-10. They lost to Evansville 7-6. They beat Evansville in the next two games 6-2, 17-7, and then loses the last game 9-5 against them. And then they had a game against Southeast Missouri postponed. They went on to beat Binghamton. They lost 8-7. They won 16-6, 4-2, and lost the last game 5-2. And then coming into this weekend series, they get swept 0-3. Missouri is just having a tough time finding their foot in a tough conference, the best baseball conference in the nation. They're having a tough time. This is going to be a tall hill to climb for Coach Kerry Jackson at Missouri, trying to get them on par with some of the best teams like they played this weekend against LSU.
Yeah, I just Perry, this would be my pick for the worst team in the league right now. I just it's just now could they be competitive in any of the other P4 conferences? Maybe, right? but it's just this conference is too deep right now for this Missouri team, and they've really struggled, and I think it's only going to get tougher. And you mentioned some of the losses they have are some of the worst losses in the conference. Stetson, Bama State, Evansville. I mean, it's gotten bad, and I think it's going to be a long season for Missouri, man. I find it hard to believe they're going to finish anywhere other than last place in the SEC this year.
We had another matchup, number 4, Georgia taking on Kentucky. Georgia trying to flex his muscle and say, hey, you're talking about Tennessee, you're talking about LSU, you're talking about Florida. Don't forget about us. The Bulldogs got the opening victory of the series on Friday against Kentucky, 12-6 in this ball game. Georgia with 10 hits, 0 errors. And on the other side for the Wildcats of Kentucky, 5 hits, 3 errors. Then we move over to Saturday in this matchup. And listen, being the number 4 team is not easy, but they got it done. And let me say this: Georgia they kind of get lost in the sauce because in game 2 they lost to Kentucky. Kentucky got it done 10-7, 13 hits in this ball game for Kentucky, 1 error, and for the Bulldogs they had 10 hits, 0 errors. And then you come into Saturday, and this is to Sunday, and this is where it was a football score. The bats were flying. There were hits all over the place. Georgia gets it 17-10. You would have thought this was an SEC Saturday game between two football teams. 15 hits in this ball game for the Bulldogs, 0 errors. 9 hits for Kentucky, 1 error. Kentucky loses the series. Georgia wins 2-1 in this weekend series in Kentucky. But look at that, Georgia. You cannot count them out, even though this was a high-flying game, high-scoring game, and a lot of runs in that Sunday game.
I'll say this. I think Georgia is probably one of the hottest teams in the country right now. I mean that they've been rolling since that loss to who was their loss to? Was it
They lost to
UNC?
Lipscomb. I mean, excuse me, that's Kentucky. I'm
Y-
sorry.
Yeah, UNC
Yeah.
Wilmington. What was Georgia's loss? But man, they've been probably one of the hottest teams in the country. The thing with Georgia though is I still think there's a little bit of a gap between them and the top few teams, but I do think they're good enough to give a lot of the middle of the pack teams problems. And my question with Kentucky, the record looks good, right? But I question their strength of schedule compared to some of the other teams in the league right now. And I do think for them to get one game against Georgia to kind of show that they can hang with that caliber of team, but I want to see them put a complete series together in conference first before I start buying stock into Kentucky. I still think right now I would have them ranked in the bottom quarter of the SEC. I think Georgia's right there sitting around that 4th, 5th, 6th spot, somewhere in there. I think that's probably where I would put the tier cap. But Georgia has checked all the boxes thus far, and the way they were able to complete to get this series under their belt was impressive.
You talking about Kentucky 14-4 on the season right now, 1-2 in conference play. You talked about the strength of schedule. They took on Wright State, beat them 25-8. They beat Morehead State, and these were exhibition games. They beat Morehead State 30-4. Then they get things going to get the season. They beat Lipscomb 11-0, lost that second game 1-3, and then the third game was canceled. They beat Belmont in a 3-game series 2-1, 12-0, 9-5. They beat Evansville 24-3. Morehead State back around 8-2. Hofstra 7-5, 6-1, 9-1. They beat Eastern Kentucky 16-0. Game 2 was canceled. They got victory over Wofford 12-2. Then they lost game 2, 12-5. And then getting Wofford in game 3, 2-1. Getting a victory over Northern Illinois before heading into this Georgia matchup 9-2. Looking at Kentucky, you're talking about their strength of schedule. And now I think you'll start to see, does it matter when you look at the depth at pitching? And dude, it seems they can hit when you saw them in that game 3 game against Georgia. But as you talked about, that strength of schedule just not there as like some of those other teams we talked about.
No, and I think that's why, to me, I think you're going to see some growing pains for this team, just as they get used to that level of competition and kind of finding their rhythm. Because some of these other teams have been battle tested, in my opinion, so they're going to be ready for that moment. So I do think it's going to be some growing pains for Kentucky, but they're a team that, if, like you said, if the bats get hot, man, I think they can compete with just about anybody in the conference. They're going to be that team that I don't think can win it, right, Perry? But they're going to be a team that can cause some havoc and maybe prevent someone from winning the conference.
Looking at Georgia, they're now 21-2 on the season, 2-1 in conference play, 16-1 at home, 3-1 on the road victories over UNC Wilmington. And then you talked about their loss, 6-2. They got a victory over Kennesaw State, 6-4. They take on UIC. They get the victories there. Then you look at continued Georgia State, Florida Gulf Coast, in which they got big victories over Florida Gulf Coast. High Point, 8-4, 16-10. Got big victory over Columbia, 14-5, 16-6. One thing we know about this Georgia team, they can hit the ball, and if you don't come ready to hit, it'll be some high scoring games. 8-6 over East Tennessee State before coming into this one. The strength of schedule isn't quite there for Georgia as well, but I just think by the way that they got it done this weekend over Kentucky, that just helped that case out a little bit more, being the number 4 team in the country.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. It's just another notch on the resume, in my opinion. I do think there's gonna be some tougher series coming down the road where they can really make a statement and prove that they're a top contender in this conference.
All right, let's move on. Here's a matchup right here. If I had to pick a game of the weekend across the SEC, this is it. And this is the two teams you've been talking about, Florida and Tennessee. Florida, number 7 team in the nation. Tennessee, the number 2 team in the nation. Tennessee gets it done. The Volunteers 6-3 over Florida on the Friday game. In this ball game, Tennessee with 7 hits, 0 errors on the other side for Florida, 9 hits, 0 errors. Great ball game between these two teams. And then you switch it over to the Saturday matchup. And this was a game I think probably had all eyes of the nation on, as Tennessee got the victory in a big way, 10-0 on over Florida. 11 hits in this one, 0 errors, and on the other side for Florida, 5 hits, 1 error. As Tennessee completely blanks Florida. And then we come around to Sunday, and the Volunteers keep things going. And man, look, you got to be me looking at the Volunteers. They have to be the most dangerous team in the country right now, aside from LSU. 7-4 over Florida, and they get the weekend series in 3 games and sweep, as they get 7 hits, 1 error, and then on the other side for the Gators, 5 hits, 2 errors. Looking at Tennessee, this is a team that can hit the ball. You're talking about home runs. You're talking about great pitching. You're talking about infield. Listen, this team is a complete team right now. And right now, the statement getting in and sweeping Florida the way that they did in opening SEC play, I guess all eyes have to be on Tennessee with the most impressive win over the weekend.
Yes, man, did you see the stat where the Tennessee pitching staff held Florida scoreless in 18 of 19 innings to close the series out?
Man,
I mean, and it like Mr. I see Mr. Campbell in the chat talking about the bats of Tennessee. Man, when you got a pitching staff like that combined with the lineup of hitters they have, man, this team, Perry, when I say they check all the boxes for me right now, and anything can happen because it's still March. But man, they're good, and I don't see a spot where unless they just go cold out of anywhere, how this team is in the College World Series competing for a national title. And this is a team, Perry, that's had talent for a few years now, and it's kind of underachieved at times. And this fan base feels like they're ready to bring home a national title. And I mean, Tennessee, top to bottom, looks like the best team in the country, in my opinion, right now as we get through the first weekend of SEC baseball.
yeah, looking at Florida, they're 16-5 on the season, 0-3. Did we see this one coming? But when you playing Tennessee in the opening weekend, I thought they would have fared better with this one. They're 3-4 on the road, 13-1 at home. You look at their wins against Air Force. You look at their wins against Jacksonville, Dayton. They go on to beat Stetson 6-1. North Florida, big victories over Miami. Even though in that 3-game series, they won it 2-1. They dropped the last game 13-7 over Miami, but they got the first 2 victories, 6-2, 6-3. Then they also lost to UCF 13-3. How about UCF getting a couple victories under their belt over some SEC teams, and especially against Florida? And then Florida goes on to get Florida Atlantic. They beat Harvard 12-0, 7-0, then beat Harvard again 22-6. And then how about the game Tuesday in a big rivalry in a midweek game against number 5 Florida State? Florida gets the victory there, 5-7-2 before they come into this weekend. I saw them against Florida State. I had high hopes with them coming out of that game saying, man, maybe they'll push Tennessee around a little bit, but no, not so fast, my friend. Tennessee showed every reason why they are one of the top teams in the nation. But when you look at Florida right now, have a big victory under their belt against Florida State in that midweek game. But Florida, nonetheless, although they dropped this one 0-3 against Tennessee, they still are a formidable power and a team to watch out for in this conference.
Yeah, for sure. And I think this is why I'm cautious sometimes and why I say, hey, it's just March. Take what I say as I'm talking in March, because one, we have to figure out how good Tennessee really is. And I think they're really good, right? I mean, they're the lone remaining undefeated team in the conference. And then on top of that, too, if Florida comes out and let's just say they sweep Georgia next week, what's the conversation, Perry?
Hmm.
I think the conversation is, hey, Florida's still pretty good. Tennessee just might be that good. And so I think Florida's going to be fine. I think it was a tough series to open up with, and I think that's the trickiest part of week one of SEC conference play is sometimes you get these big blowouts, and then it turns out that the team that lost is actually pretty good, right? And so I think for Florida fans, be patient. It was a tough series. You ran into a buzzsaw. Go out, get the series win against Georgia, and then everything starts turning around moving forward from there.
Yeah, you talk about Tennessee 20-0 on the season, 3-0 in conference play. They've just pretty much steamrolled everybody. Hofstra, Samford, North Alabama, a hell of a game against Oklahoma State, who's been playing some pretty tough competition coming out of the SEC. They beat Oklahoma State 5-2, getting victory over Rice, a 5-1 victory over Arizona, beating Radford, Xavier, St. Bonaventure, West Georgia, and then coming in this one against Florida, man. Tennessee is the team to watch out for. If I'm anybody, I'm staying out of Tennessee's way right now because, look, I think this team is going to make a run. If there was a team I thought probably would have, upset them early, I would have thought it was going to be Florida, just watching Florida come in. And as I said, I go back and look at that midweek game against Florida State just on last Tuesday. But the way Tennessee handled business and continues to remain undefeated, they are a team that I think everybody, you go have to schedule and look out for because, listen, this is going to be tough. I see somebody say Tennessee is West Georgia. I mean, if you want to put it that way, it is what it is. But I don't think the Georgia people are going to be claiming Tennessee anytime soon, right?
No, I don't. I don't think they're be. I don't think they're claiming anything.
All right, let's move on. Let's talk about Oklahoma in their first SEC series taking on South Carolina. How about Paul Maneri, former LSU head baseball coach, jumping back into the coaching ranks now, taking over South Carolina? And look, coming into this weekend, got South Carolina off to a pretty good start. But Oklahoma gets the victory. Number 12, Oklahoma on the Friday game, 8-5 over South Carolina. In this one, Oklahoma with 11 hits, 0 errors. And on the other side for South Carolina for South Carolina, the Gamecocks, 12 hits, 1 error as South Carolina dropped game one against Oklahoma. And Oklahoma transitioning over from the Big 12 into SEC. We had that same conversation talking about Texas. What would that look like with them transitioning? Guess what? Paul Maneri said, hold on, they're still in the SEC. I'm going to have to bless you and welcome you into it. And that's what he did on Saturday as the Gamecocks pulled it out 11-5 over Oklahoma. 14 hits in that ball game for South Carolina, 0 errors on the other side for the Sooners, 9 hits and 3 errors as South Carolina was able to get their first victory over Oklahoma in this series. And then it came down to the Sunday game. And anybody want to guess who won this game? Anybody? Oh, of course, because you see the stats. Oklahoma in the tough one, Blue. 6-5 over South Carolina. They get the weekend series over Paul Maneri and the Gamecocks. 6 hits, 2 errors for Oklahoma, number 12 team in the nation, and 11 hits for South Carolina and 1 error. Looking at Oklahoma, they come in and win their first series in SEC play over a veteran coach in Paul Maneri, who knows also well about the SEC. What's your thoughts on Oklahoma, top 25 team, but able to come in and say, hey, watch out, SEC?
I like the fact that they were able to get the series, man. It was such a clutch performance in that last game, man. What, one inning away for South Carolina to win this thing?
Mm-hmm.
What, they got two in the ninth to four to get to send it into extras, and then a big home run got them the lead. Crooks closes it out as the reliever, and I think it was just it shows that Oklahoma has the talent to hang in this conference. Now, listen, I'll say this, Perry. I think if I was doing a power ranking, South Carolina would probably be right there above Missouri. So I think it's still going to be a tough road for Oklahoma, but like we talked about, Oklahoma's still a top 25 team, and for them in Texas to kind of get a win under their belt was huge, and to do it in the fashion that Oklahoma did. Sometimes those close wins period can inspire a little win streak here, inspire a team to get rolling. I do wonder if that's what Oklahoma needed to maybe pull off some upsets down the stretch here in SEC play.
And I'm looking at Oklahoma's schedule. You talked about back in February, 2 big wins. At the time, they beat number 7 Oregon State 8-4. Then how about beat number 2 Virginia at the time 5-4 in 12 innings? But this team also, Dallas Baptist is a team that I think we're going to eventually talk about a little bit later down the line. They are a tough team for anybody. They beat Oklahoma in 7 innings, 11-0. Oklahoma goes on to beat Sam Houston. They beat Louisiana Tech before coming into this one, and they had a midweek game on Wednesday. But looking at them right now, Oklahoma being one of the top teams in the nation, they are a team that I think still, and I cannot wait to that Texas-Oklahoma game in SEC play to watch these two teams do what they do now in the SEC. On the other side, are you impressed? Let me not use the word impressed. Your thoughts on Paul Mainieri getting back into the coaching ranks after stepping away from baseball at LSU?
No, I think it's good, and you know it's funny, Perry, is we've kind of seen this across multiple sports, right? Where we kind of have like these coaches who either for one reason or another, right? I know there was some that stepped away for NCAA reasons in basketball, but we see these coaches wind up in new places, new jobs, and keep finding the same success. I don't know if I don't know if Manera is going to find the same. It's going to be a little bit more of a rebuild. I think you agree with me on that. And so I think it's good though, and I think it speaks to the level of coaching in the SEC, man. That's why there's 11 teams in the top 25 and four in the top four, four in the top five. So I think it's going to be really cool. And I don't know, do they have a series with LSU this year?
Let me look. I'm looking on here now. Let's see.
Because that would be cool if they went back to
They do.
Baton
They have a
Rouge.
series with LSU. That's going to be May. That's going to be in May 15th.
I like
Thursday
it.
night series.
I'll
It's
be
going to start
curious
Thursday, Friday, and Saturday.
I'll be curious what the reception is.
I'm curious too. This that game is going to be in South Carolina though. That series is going to be over in South Carolina.
Mm, okay, so it won't be an LSU. Okay, that's a little different. But no, man, I think Oklahoma, uh, re- it's going to be a good year. But I just don't think I think they are well in that bottom quarter of the SEC. I just don't know if they got the talent right now to go win the SEC this year, or even compete at in the top half. To be honest with you, I think they're going to need a year or more to potentially to get to that point. I think Texas. If I had to go between Oklahoma and Texas, I think Texas has a much better shot to win the SEC than Oklahoma does.
Looking at South Carolina's schedule, you talking about before they headed to SEC play this weekend, took on Sacred Heart, got victories over them. Winthrop, Queens, beat Milwaukee in the series, beat Gardner Webb. They lost 5-3 against Clemson in a tough one. And then they dropped all three games to Clemson, lost 5-1, 8-2. Clemson got it done. They came back and beat Davidson. They beat the Citadel. They beat Morehead State in a 3-game series. Victory over Georgia State. And then coming into this weekend with Oklahoma. Can South Carolina potentially have dark horse written over them at the fact that they have an experienced coach? They are a team, of course. They're not in the upper echelon of the top 25 teams that we see. But with an experienced coach in Paul Mainieri, could they have dark horse later on down the line?
Uh, no, but they could have sport. But I'll say this. How about this? I'll meet you halfway. I'll say they have a chance to be spoiler
Yeah.
more so than dark horse. I think dark horse. I think you would be looking at a team. I mean, because what? I don't think you could call dark horse anybody. Florida, Arkansas, LSU, Tennessee, maybe Texas are the favorites. So I think, dark horse, I look at Georgia, Vandy, Bama, Auburn, somewhere in there, right?
And
But
Blue, I was trying to go somebody not in the top 25,
the problem
but
is,
it's tough in this
yeah,
conference.
the problem is what 87% of the conference is top 25, and the other and two of the ones that aren't in the top 25 probably are getting votes.
Yeah.
That's the problem. Is so I don't know if I think spoiler is the better word. Where I think they're going to knock someone off, and it's going to impact their ability to win the SEC this year, or impact their seeding in postseason play. I think that's where I'm gonna put it more so than dark horse to compete for the conference title this year.
A pair of other two top 25 teams across the conference took on this weekend. Alabama, number 17, taking on number 19, Texas A&M. Texas A&M falling short in this one by 2 runs. Alabama, the Crimson Tide, get it done 6-4. 8 hits, 1 error for the Crimson Tide. On the other end for the Aggies, 11 hits, 0 errors. Alabama gets game 1. Then, this is one of those series I did circle because I looked at Alabama and I looked at Texas A&M coming to this series. Both teams in top 25 have found some success, but they seem like it's Texas A&M success has come a little bit different from Alabama's coming into this one. And I'll talk more about that when you look at the schedule. Alabama gets game 2 on Saturday, 6-2, 8 hits, 0 errors on the other end for the Aggies. 2 runs, 4 hits, 3 errors. And then we come into the Sunday game as Alabama pretty much wrapped up the series. But of course, you want to see, can you close things out on this Sunday? And the Crimson Tide and the Aggies. Let me see. Here we go. I'm sorry. And they get it done. 2-0, 2 runs, 9 hits, 1 error for Texas A&M. 0 runs, 4 hits, 1 error. Looking at Alabama, they close it out. They sweep Texas A&M. Alabama Crimson Tide, number 17 versus number 19 Texas A&M. Your thoughts on this one, Blue, as the Crimson Tide sweep, go 3-0 in the opening series, Texas A&M falling short.
Yeah, it was just another. I mean, listen, A&M has really underperformed. I think they're probably the most disappointing team right now in the SEC, just from where they were supposed to be, right? Because if I'm not mistaken, they came into the preseason ranked number 1 in a lot of power rankings. They had a lot of expectations, and they have just fallen off. I mean, they came into this series 10-6, and they never could get it going. And the thing is, they had a chance to win all 3 games and just weren't able to capitalize on opportunity. Their pitching staff's there, hitting is super inconsistent. And I look at the depth of this conference, and it's like if you don't capitalize on your small opportunities, it can get ugly for you really fast. And I think you look, I mean, 2 home runs put Alabama over the top on in the first game. Then they score 3 to 4 runs in the ninth on Saturday, and then they get shut out on Sunday. So it's like Bama consistently got better and better and better, and A&M just continually just came up a little bit short. I think it was an impressive win for Bama, who I think is kind of emerging as a dark horse for the conference, where they're a lot better than I thought they were going to be. And A&M is trending in the wrong direction, where they're looking like they are not a contender at all, despite entering the season as one of the potential favorites to win this conference.
Looking at Texas A&M, they're now 10-9 on the season overall, 0-3 in conference play, 3-game losing streak. They started the season with Elon winning a 3-game series and then took on Cal Poly. They dropped one in that last game of the series against Cal Poly, 3-2. They also lost 7-3 to Texas State. They lost to Arizona 3-2. They lost to Oklahoma State 4-0 before shaking back against Rice. Then you look at against UTSA, they lost 7-4 against them. They got a victory over Texas Southern 6-2. They beat New Mexico State 19-0, 7-1, and then lost game 3 against New Mexico State 4-1. They got a victory over Prairie View before heading into this game with Alabama, man. Texas A&M just tough losses here and there for this team, as it seems like they're just kind of stumbling their way along through this schedule, man. And if this is going to be any indication of what they showed against Alabama, they're going to have to get it together quick, fast, and hurry as the thick of SEC play is going to begin.
Yeah, it's they're gonna have it's almost desperation time, as crazy as that might sound. Because if they get swept again, Perry, I mean, you're looking at what, 0-6 in
Yeah.
conference, and you're probably out of it already. So A&M's got to turn it around, but for Bama, man, I was really, really impressed. I think Bama is the team that has surprised me the most so far. And you look at some of the wins they have. I mean, listen, that they've done a really, really good job this year. And on top of that, too, their one loss I feel like was more of a wake up call. And since that loss, they've been on a roll here. And I do want to see. I think the last box that Bama has to check for me to put them in that contender category is I need to see them either compete with or beat one of those top 4 teams in the
Yeah,
conference.
you talk about Bama right now. They are rolling. As you say, you are impressed with them. They're going to be, you considering them your dark horse. They're like teetering top 25, but I think with that impressive win that they had this weekend, they're now 21 on the season, 3-0 in conference play. They start the season off with wins over Bradley, Middle Tennessee State. They got a 15-1 victory in 7 innings over Alabama State. Got a victory over Coastal Carolina. They beat number 12 at the time, North Carolina State 4-0. Victory over Ohio State, over Jacksonville State. A 3-game series over North Dakota State. How about Jacksonville State again? They beat Troy 3-1, beat Presbyterian, but they lost that last game in that 3-game series 11-8 that's kind of where it comes in at right there with that long loss on the season, man, with Alabama. But as you say, they could be potentially, and it's tough for me, I guess, to say dark horse of a team that's already top 25. And you just can understand, I think just then with that victory over Texas A&M, the way that they did, you're going to see them continuously move up. If they can continue that success in this conference, they'll keep finding a way to move up, but they're going to have to remain consistent from pitching and hitting on that end for the Crimson Tide.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it, man. They've sky. I mean, they were 12th in today's top 25. They've skyrocketed. They're ahead of Florida right now, Perry.
As
And
they
so
should, considering what Florida showed us this weekend against Tennessee.
that's true. But the question is, does Bama do any better against Tennessee? I don't know. I mean, well, we'll see. But I think, like I said, man, Bama coming into the season was a borderline top 25-ish team.
Mm-hmm.
And right now they're sitting top 15 in the country with the potential to break into the top 10 with another series win, man. So super impressive year right now for the Crimson Tide, man. It's been a long time since that team was a legit contender to get to the College World Series. And I want to see if they can put it together throughout the whole season, or is this just another hot start and they falter down the stretch like we've seen before with these Alabama teams?
And then let's go on to the last matchup of the weekend, top 25. Actually, Auburn was right there at the number 25 spot, knocking at the door, trying to move up against Vanderbilt, who's number 16. Auburn gets the Friday game 6-2 over Vanderbilt. In that ball game, the Tigers, 8 hits, 2 errors for the Commodores on the other end. 6 hits, 1 error. Game 1 belongs to Auburn. And listen, I've never put much stock into Auburn baseball, especially going against Vanderbilt. I didn't know how I thought this was going to go in this series. This was one of those sit back and wait moments for me looking at these programs because I wasn't sure would Auburn baseball be able to come in and make a statement early against Vanderbilt. Then Vanderbilt on Saturday gets the victory 8-6, 7 hits in that ball game, 0 errors, 9 hits for the Tigers of Auburn, and 2 errors as Vanderbilt tied this thing up. And then it came down to Sunday as this series was tied up 1-1. Auburn getting game 1, Vanderbilt getting game 2. And listen, looking at Vanderbilt's past in this conference, you got to think that when they took on Auburn, I thought Vanderbilt was the favorite coming into this one. But Auburn found a way to get it done in game 3 and wins the series 2-1, 7-6 over Vanderbilt. 8 hits, 0 errors for the Tigers on the other end for the Commodores. 10 hits, 2 errors. Auburn with a statement victory to start conference play over Vanderbilt and a statement series win, getting it 2-1.
And then that Sunday night win was so great. I mean, Perry down 0-2 in the pitch count and one strike away from getting out of the inning to the ninth and a grand slam to get the win on Sunday, man. It was just some late.
That's
It was just
magical, baby.
yeah. You gotta love it. But I'll say this: the most impressive player to me, it's like the difference with Auburn is they've really, really struggled with their pitching rotation. Where Perry Friday night, man, they got a killer out there, and they're gonna give anyone in the country a run for their money. But then when you get to the weekend, man, it gets real thin. And and I think that's the biggest thing for Auburn is finding some consistency because I think you even saw it throughout the out of conference play, man. One week, listen, they're out there beating Oregon State, right? And Ohio State and they're rolling, they're beating Troy, who's a top 25 team. But then you're losing to Holy Cross and Old Dominion and UAB and you stumble there. But I think this was a signature win for them. And I'll say this, man, the best player on this team right now, I think, is the LSU transfer Samuel Dutton at pitcher.
Mm-hmm.
Man, the kid is just man, he's on fire right now, Perry. Right now, I mean, he got the win, if I'm not mistaken, Friday night, but through his 5 starts this year, Perry, 3-1 with a 1.6 ERA.
Man.
He's dealing right now, and I think it was big for Auburn to get him in the rotation, made it a little bit deeper. And as long as Auburn can find a way to have some sort of consistency throughout the weekend, I think they're going to be good. And they kind of fall into that mid range where they're probably going to get to the tournament. And if they can just get hot at the right time, they maybe can make a run to the College World Series. But I don't look at them as a true contender for the SEC right now until I see more consistency from them.
And let's look at the Vanderbilt Commodores, right? 15-5 overall on the season, 1-2 in conference play after dropping this weekend series against Auburn. They start the season off with a victory over Grand Canyon. They fell short to Nebraska 6-4, getting a victory over UC Irvine, Air Force, St. Mary's, Tennessee Tech, UCLA, but then they lost to USC 3-1. They also lost to UConn 6-2. And then continuously moving on, they beat Xavier 15-3, 6-1, and 4-0. They beat Valparaiso 12-0 before heading into this weekend game. Traditionally, what we've seen out of Vanderbilt has been a team that can hit with great pitching. Now looking at this team coming in, losing this weekend series against a team who I thought Vanderbilt was going to be the team to get that series. I thought they were the better team coming in, but clearly Auburn said not so fast. They got the series victory 2-1. But looking at Vanderbilt, is it time to panic for them, or does it seem like Vanderbilt may can get this thing back on track as they get into the depths of SEC play?
I think a little bit of both, right? Because you want to be desperate because you need to keep up with the
Yeah.
Joneses, right, and keep up with the top end of the conference. But at the same time, they had a chance to win two, both of those games. And I think even with the grand slam on Sunday, you had a real chance to close out that series. And maybe listen, if Auburn and Vandy play three times again, Vandy probably wins two of them. I think just with the talent on that team, I just think they got to calm down. They got to be more consistent and close out some of these series when presented the opportunity like they were. I mean, you had Auburn down 0-2 in the bottom of the eighth, one out. You get to the ninth, you probably close that game out without giving up a grand slam. And so I just think it was poor execution down the stretch for Vandy. I think they're going to be just fine. They'll still be a top half team in the SEC.
Most impressive series victory this weekend.
Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, and maybe Florida's a dud, right? Maybe Florida goes on and they get swept two, three more series. But for right now, just with the information we have presented, man, Tennessee was the most dominant team of the weekend, and they did it against a really, really good Florida team who's still a top 15 team nationally.
Most disappointing loss in the series this weekend.
Ooh, I think it's Vandy still. Um, I think they were the more talented team. They had a chance to open up conference play with a top 25 series win over Auburn, and they let it slip out of their hands. Man, they had every opportunity on Sunday to close that series out, and they let Auburn just take it from them, right? And it was a major upset, a massive win for Auburn. I think it's one at the end of the year. Vandy's going to look back on and be like, man, that one should have been ours.
Yeah, I believe so, man, because coming into that series, once again, I had Vandy picked to win that series, but Auburn got it done. Let's move to Tuesday to some midweek games. You talk to me about some of these games. Let's look at Georgia versus Georgia Tech. What's your thoughts on this one? The two Georgia schools. We saw Florida and Florida State last week. Florida getting the victory over Florida State, but now Georgia and Georgia Tech this week, Tuesday.
Yeah, I think this is a chance for Georgia to get a big win over their rival. I think they're significantly more talented than Georgia Tech, and unless something major happens, I think they should win this one pretty handily.
Let's go East Tennessee State taking on Tennessee. East Tennessee State comes to this game 15-4, but does that matter against the undefeated Tennessee Volunteers?
No, sir. Go ahead and give me the balls by a lot.
We move on. Jacksonville taking on Florida. Florida looking at the Gators. I don't think they have ones. They have the Gators hurt after this weekend, losing to Tennessee, taking on Jacksonville, who's 11-8, 2-1 in conference play. Florida, this would hope to be one to get them back on track.
Yeah, this should be a this should be a beatdown. The problem though is if you're Florida, man, you can't let Tennessee beat you again, and that's what you always worry about is just that momentum carrying over. They got to get back on track. I think they do. I think listen, Jack. If it was any team better than Jacksonville, I'd be a little worried, but I think they're going to be able to walk past Jacksonville.
South Carolina have a Tuesday game, 6:30 first pitch on Eastern Standard Time. It's going to be against College of Charleston. Paul Maneri does pretty well in out-of-conference play.
Yeah, give me the Gamecocks on this one.
Moving forward, Murray State 12-4, taking on Kentucky 14-4. Does this have a Murray State I can beat Kentucky written all over it?
This isn't my upset pick of the week, but I think this has upset potential.
Well, Murray State's right there. Then here's one, and I think the Razorback fans have to look at this. Arkansas 18-2. They got the weekend victory over Ole Miss. They taking on Oral Roberts, who has traditionally been a really good baseball program, 12-6, 1-2 in conference play.
Yeah, give me the Razorbacks. I don't think this is your typical Oral Roberts team. I think Arkansas wins this one pretty handily.
Vanderbilt versus Belmont. Belmont comes into this game 8-13 on the season. Vanderbilt, of course, losing the weekend series to Auburn. They're 15-5 on the season, 1-2 in conference play.
Yep, give me very big. I think they bounce back in a big way. I think they're going to be motivated to get back on the right track after letting Auburn slip away when they had that series won.
Battle of the Texas A&M system. Texas A&M Corpus Christi takes on the Aggies of Texas A&M. Texas A&M Corpus Christi 8-13 on the season, and then you look at Texas A&M 10-8 on the season. Who you got in this one?
Texas A&M, this is one that they can get. I know that hasn't been a great season, but they're the better team.
Jackson State coming out of the SWAC. The Tigers 12-6, 3-2 in conference play, taking on Mississippi State, who failed all three games this past weekend. Mississippi State 13-7. Who you got in this one between two Mississippi schools in Jackson State and Mississippi State?
I think Mississippi State gets this because I do think too, and I know this isn't a SWAC show, but Jackson had that brawl this weekend against PV in baseball. I do wonder if there's going to be some players missing, and especially number two, man. You can't throw bats into the stadium during the fight, but I'll be curious to see if there's any ramifications from that. But I think Mississippi State gets this one.
And I'm sure Mississippi State fans will be tuning in trying to figure out what players from Jackson may be out because Jackson looked like they may be handed once they get into that game with Mississippi State. Here's one I really do like. Ole Miss taking on Southern Miss. Who you got in this one, man?
I think this shockingly this could have upset potential. Listen, uh, I think Ole Miss could possibly pull. I know it's weird saying upset right when it's Ole Miss, Southern Miss, but Southern Miss is a top 25 team, man. And but I do think Ole Miss has the talent to push them. But I'm going to go here. I'm going to stick with Southern Miss. I think they get it because if I'm not mistaken, it's at Southern Miss too. It's a home game for Southern Miss. I think they get it. They get it done in Hattiesburg.
Alabama State coming out of the SWAC 9-2 on the season, 2-1 in conference play, taking on Auburn, who got them a weekend series over Vanderbilt. Auburn 16-4, 2-1 in conference play. SWAC versus SEC. Who you got in this one? And Alabama State has a victory so far of an SEC team as they beat Missouri down in the Andre Dawson Invitational in Vero Beach, Florida. Now they're taking on Auburn, two Alabama squads. Who you got?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I'm a little nervous about this one. Like you said, Bama State's already got an SEC win. Auburn has been known to slack in their midweek games. We've seen it all year, right? Right, Perry?
Mm-hmm.
They slack in these games where even they're the more talented team. I think Bama State keeps it closer than expected, but I'm gonna take Auburn for the win.
Here's another one. South Alabama taking on Alabama. South Alabama 10-9 on the season, 0-3 in conference play. Alabama coming in with an impressive weekend series victory, 19-1 on the season, 2-0 in conference play. Who you got in these two Alabama squads? Mobile versus Tuscaloosa.
Man, and I think it's gonna be, I think it's gonna be Bama. I don't know if South has enough this year, but I will say they did beat Ole Miss 14-5 earlier this year, and so it could be closer than expected, but I think Bama gets it done.
Then we take a look at LSU taking on New Orleans. UNO, excuse me, comes in this ball game 11-7 on the season, 5-4 in conference play. The Tigers, big weekend victory, series victory over Missouri. They're 20-1 on the season, 3-0. Listen, they take their midweek games really serious over at Alex Box Stadium. The LSU Tigers, the best team in the country right now, in my opinion, right there between neck and neck with Tennessee. What you have with the Tigers right now in this one against UNO?
Yep, give me the Tigers in this one. Like you said, that LSU has been known not to be a team that sleepwalks through their midweek games. They're gonna be fine.
Then you look at Oklahoma taking on UTA, University of Texas Arlington, and who you got in this one? Arlington 6-10, Oklahoma 17-2 on the season, 10-1.
Yeah,
Excuse me, 2-1 in conference play.
this should be a blowout. Give me Oklahoma.
And here's one: UTSA taking on Texas. UTSA 16-6 on the season. You're looking at Texas with a big victory this weekend in their opening SEC conference play. First time in the conference. They swept after victory 3-0. They're 17-1 on the season. You can put them in the conversation as one of the top teams in the conference, not only in the conference, but in the country as well, taking on UTSA. Does UTSA have an opportunity to possibly pull an upset against the Longhorns?
Possibly. I think this could be a competitive game, but I still think Texas gets it done in the midweek.
Oh man, I'm looking at all of these. I'm trying to see if there's going to be an upset. I think as much as I like the Razorbacks, I think you got to circle Oral Roberts. I'm nervous of that matchup with Arkansas and Oral Roberts because Arkansas struggles sometimes against teams that you just think they're supposed to blow out the water. I go back and I look at that series against Charlotte. I mean, Charlotte really pushed them. That was a tough series. I think if I'm gonna have to pull the biggest upset of the midweek games, I think I'm gonna do Oral Roberts over Arkansas.
I like it. I think if you're gonna get one, I think it's gonna be one of the two Alabama schools.
Yeah,
I think it's gonna be Bama State over Auburn or South over Bama.
Alabama State over Auburn will be huge for the SWAC in that conference, looking to get a victory. And it'd be even bigger for Bama State, who won the weekend series against Southern. And then you're talking about having a victory already over Missouri, beating them down at in Vero Beach, Florida, in the Andre Dawson Classic. Bama State has the potential. That would be huge for that program. Let's look at next week, right? Let's look at the weekend matchups coming up, and we'll talk about them next week. But we got a big one. Florida, who dropped their weekend series against Tennessee, taking on Georgia. This should be a good one, Blue.
Massive, and I think for Florida, you at least got to get one of the games, if not get the series. I'm not looking for a sweep, but man, you got to get some sort of momentum because if you go out there and get swept by Georgia, the season could take a very, very weird turn, right? And so I think this series is extremely important for Florida. But if you're Georgia and you get the sweep or get the series, man, you've really entered that contender that could, I would say, the contender part of the SEC, and you kind of get labeled as a team that could possibly win this conference. And so a very, very big series, man. I do think if we're making predictions, I think Georgia gets a series 2-1 over the
I'm
Gators.
gonna go the opposite way. I'm gonna go Florida in this one, 2-1. I think the way that they underperforming, of course, it was Tennessee, right? That's the notion we're gonna continue to give. It's like, hey, I understand you had to play Tennessee. You're not gonna be the only one, right? Tennessee is gonna do that to plenty of teams in this conference. But I think Florida has to take a look at themselves. And I think just looking back at that midweek game last week against Florida State, they showed that they can play some ball. And I'm going to take Florida in this one over Georgia. I think they get the series 2-1 on the other end for me. I'm going to go Gators. You going Georgia.
Yep.
We'll look back at this next week and see where we stand. How about this one? Auburn versus Kentucky.
Ooh, but this is the big one right here. Does Auburn does Auburn keep the momentum with the win over Vandy or does Kentucky, kind of establish themselves, move up in the power rankings, move up in the tier of the conference, and it's at Kentucky. God, this is a tough one. I'm gonna go with my heart here. I'm gonna pick with my heart. I'm gonna go Auburn gets a 2-1 over the Wildcats.
Note that this game will be in Lexington, Kentucky. And while I went Florida, that game is going to be in Gainesville. I just think the Florida Gators are going to hold it down up there in Gainesville. In this one, I'm still not sold all the way on Auburn, even though they got the weekend series over Vanderbilt. I'm looking at Kentucky still being able to knock at the door. Uh, I'm with you. I'm going Auburn in this one. I think Auburn gets it done in this series 2-1. I think Kentucky comes out, win games one. I think, in my opinion, Auburn closes this out on Saturday and Sunday and finds a way to get this series. Let's move on. Texas A&M and Vanderbilt. Texas A&M, Vanderbilt, both teams dropped their series over the weekend. Who you got in this one?
I got Vandy with the sweep over A&M.
You you're not feeling the Aggies at all.
None. Yeah, I just don't think I just don't trust them right now, man.
I'm with you. I thought I had Vandy picked last week to beat Auburn in that series. At some point, Vanderbilt, I think, is a team that when they wake up, watch out. They may not quite be there yet, but when they wake up, watch out. I'm going Vanderbilt over Texas A&M. This game will be in Nashville, Tennessee. I think Vanderbilt at home gets it done. Here we go. This is one of those ones you talked about you want to see. Alabama versus Tennessee. Alabama getting a weekend series. Tennessee getting a very impressive win this weekend in their series. Now these two teams collide. Who you got? This game in Tuscaloosa, Alabama this weekend.
I'm taking Tennessee to win the series, but Bama will give Tennessee their first loss on the year. Give me Tennessee winning the series 2-1 over Bama.
Give me which day. Was it Saturday, Friday, or Sunday? Which one you think? Is it
Saturday.
game one they drop?
I'm gonna give them game two. Bama wins on Saturday.
That is huge, and this is going to be when I say circle with all eyes around the conference. You want to see a hell of a game. I think this is going to be one with Tennessee and Alabama. I'm going Tennessee. I think Tennessee continues to remain undefeated. I'm going to take all three games with Tennessee. I think they push forward in this one. I like Alabama and where they're at right now. It's Tennessee, though. And the way Tennessee completely dominated Florida, I just don't see Alabama being able to do it. But the games have to be played. But I'm going Tennessee with a clean sweep all three games in Tuscaloosa versus Alabama. Here's one for you. Ole Miss versus Missouri. This one in Columbia, Missouri. Does Coach Kerrick Jackson in Missouri, can they get something going against Ole Miss, who dropped their series against Arkansas this weekend?
I'm going Ole Miss 2-1 over Missouri. I think Missouri gets the last day. Ole Miss closes this thing out on Saturday, though.
Yeah, looking at Missouri, they have some fight in them. They pushed LSU in that Saturday game. They made some hell of a plays out in around the diamond in the outfield, particularly. I like Missouri, but I think Ole Miss just has enough to get it done, being able to hit around the park, pitching as well. I'm going to go Ole Miss with this one. I'm going to go 2-1 in this one, Ole Miss. Let's say Paul Maneri in South Carolina headed up to Fayetteville, Arkansas to take on Coach Van Horn and the Razorbacks. Who you see in this one between South Carolina Gamecocks and Arkansas Razorbacks?
I'm going to go Arkansas 2-1 over South Carolina. I think South Carolina wins day 3, but this one's closed out by Saturday as well.
Yeah, I'm going to go Arkansas. I think it's 2-1 as well. The Razorbacks, man, listen. They are tough to cheer for sometimes. It's like right when you think they're supposed to have it, it's like, God, dog, what happened? But I'm going to go Razorback in this one. But listen, do not count out Paul Maneri in South Carolina. Paul Maneri, hey, he got a lot of tricks up his sleeves. He knows this conference very well, and he knows these coaches very well, along as with these teams. So I say don't count out South Carolina. Don't be surprised on the back end, but I'm with you. I'm taking Arkansas. Let's go to Mississippi State taking on Oklahoma over in Norman, Oklahoma. What you like in this one between Oklahoma and Mississippi State, the Sooners and the Bulldogs?
Mm.
When I hear you say, I know it's something.
This one's tough, man. I really do think this will probably be one of the more competitive series of the weekend. But I'll go Oklahoma 2-1 over Mississippi State. I think it comes down to Sunday. They'll split the first 2 games. Sunday, the Sooners will get out of there with the series win.
Yeah, I'm going to take Oklahoma in this one. I think they roll on as they continue in SEC play in year one. I like where they stand. I'm going to go Oklahoma. I think personally, I'm going to take Oklahoma in all 3 games. I like Oklahoma being in Norman. And here's the game, another game to circle, right? Texas and LSU over in Austin, Texas, man, listen. Everybody across the state of Louisiana and Texas will be watching this one, as we know these two teams do not like each other. And now you put them in conference play, playing some baseball, 2 passionate, proud fan bases. Man, listen, the Tigers versus the Longhorns, this should be a good one. You better believe it's going to be a sold-out crowd all 3 games. Who you got in this one between the Texas Longhorns and the LSU Tigers?
Oh, man. I think it's 2-1. I think it's 2-1 LSU.
Yeah.
I think LSU gets the first 2. Texas gets the win on Sunday.
I'm with you. I'm going to take LSU 2-1. I think LSU drops game 1 on Friday, and they pick it back up on the back end and close this thing out strong on Saturday and on Sunday. But nonetheless, man, this, besides that Tennessee and Alabama game, which one would you consider game of the week? LSU, Texas, or Tennessee, Alabama?
LSU, Texas.
Yeah. It's just something when you say those 2 names, knowing where they stand in baseball. It's something about this game that just stands out by that.
Yeah, and also too, I think Alabama still has a little bit to prove, right? I think when you look at everything, like Texas LSU is a top 8 matchup. Bama's still that team that's trending up there. But Perry, I don't know if they've proven themselves yet to be in that elite category. You're looking at Texas LSU being against 2 teams that are bona fide title contenders. I just don't put Bama in that realm yet. And now if Bama wins this weekend, if they find a way to win the series against Tennessee or something like that, we're having a whole different conversation about Bama on next week's show.
All right, let's do this before we get ready to get out of here. Let's go through a power ranking, right? Let's start from bottom to the top. And I'll start with my power ranking this week. we look at Texas A&M and we look at Missouri. They're about 1-1 to me. I put Texas A&M right over Missouri. I like Missouri's fight, but I put Missouri at the bottom. I put Texas A&M right there above them. Above Texas A&M, let's go Mississippi State. How about that? I'll go Mississippi State right there. And amongst that, I'll go Mississippi State, South Carolina. As I move up, I'll probably go Florida because of what they did against Tennessee, but still, it is Florida. They're one of the top teams, but they're going to have to shake back and show me. I'll go Oklahoma, Kentucky. You know what? I'll go Kentucky, Oklahoma, Ole Miss, Georgia, Auburn, Arkansas, Texas, Alabama, LSU, Tennessee. I think Tennessee's still the best team. I'll put LSU right there behind them. And then top four, my top four, I think I will look at overall. And really, I guess, let me say top five. I have Tennessee number one. Now let's just do top five. My top five, I have Tennessee number one, LSU number two. I would go, let's go Arkansas number three, Texas number four, Alabama number five.
All right. So power rankings, I would probably do just my top five. Tennessee, I would go LSU, Arkansas, Texas, Georgia, and then Bama right there is like a close 5B.
So that Georgia, Bama, and Georgia knocking on the door for me. Georgia,
Yes,
Bama right there.
agreed. And I think they both have chances to prove this week, right? If Georgia runs through Florida or Bama finds a way to get something going against Tennessee, I think it becomes even a harder conversation, right? But I think over the next 2 weeks at least, Perry, I think that top 4 to 5 is really going to separate itself. It always does, right? There's always like those elite teams, and you could tell they just look different when they walk out there.
Yeah, Georgia and Alabama have opportunities to pretty much showcase their talent this weekend. Georgia taking on Florida down in Gainesville, and Alabama hosting Tennessee up in Tuscaloosa. Those are two teams to watch. There, I'm with you. I went Alabama over Georgia. Georgia going to have to show me this week against Florida. And if Florida really does not step up, Florida continues to drop down for me. I mean, at some point, I have to look at Florida and say, well, what are we really watching? What are we looking at? But Alabama and Georgia, two teams who are going to have matchups this weekend that if they want to prove it to the voters and want to prove it to the fan bases, this is the weekend to do it with Tennessee going to Tuscaloosa and the Bulldogs going down to Gainesville to take on the Gators. This is a weekend to get it done.
Agreed. You can't get swept again, and you have to at least look competitive. I think if they lose this series, they fall into the pretender category for me, and I really question their overall success over the season, man, because I think it's just going to get tougher. And because I think if they bounce back, right, you look at it as okay, Tennessee's just an elite team, bad matchup, week one, maybe they had a bad weekend, but if it continues, eventually you just are who you are, Perry. And I think we got to look at Florida as a team that had the talent coming into the preseason and was just never able to put it together.
And they did last Tuesday against Florida State. That's why I still got hope in them. That's why I'm picking them this weekend over Georgia. I still believe they are a team, and I think this is the one. And I guess as we look at Tennessee, that it does everybody that play Tennessee, if Tennessee steamrolls them in the series, do we just say, hey, you unfortunately you played in a very elite team?
Yeah, I think that's fair, right? I mean, if they continue to roll, it's fair just to say, hey, maybe Tennessee is just that good.
Yeah.
Because if they're doing it to everybody, then
Yeah.
Tennessee is just that good. But if Tennessee fall like the problem for Florida is even if they bounce back, what if Tennessee
Yeah.
falters?
Oh, against Bama.
Yeah, and then we're kind of looking around like, okay, well, how do we classify either one of these teams?
We just simply say, man, that's just another weekend in the SEC.
There you go. That's all, that's all you can say.
Another weekend in the SEC, and I'm looking forward to that LSU Texas game. I think, as you said, you circle that. All eyes will be watching Tennessee and Alabama. This will give us an opportunity to say, is Alabama for real? But then I want to see can Texas against LSU in a first true test in conference play since joining the SEC. they're going to get a tough matchup. It's going to be a sold-out crowd all 3 games over in Austin, Texas. But this is just one I think that you have to circle as the game of the week. And can the Tigers go on the road as they showed even at neutral sites, victories over Dallas Baptist and Kansas State, up over in Dallas, and can they get it done in what's going to be a true testament of a hostile environment in this conference?
Yeah, I'm so excited for over the next few weeks, man. I mean, it is. Listen, there's some big series, and listen, like we talked about at the kind of bring it full circle. When you have 11 teams in the top 25, you have 6 in the top 10, you have 8 in the top 15. Then every single week you're gonna have to bring your A game, and I think we're gonna like it might even take more than the next 2 weeks period for some teams to really separate themselves, just because of how competitive it's really going to be. And you're going to have teams that lose series periods that might even go up in the top
Yeah,
25 because it's that competitive.
yeah. Do you have a updated top 25 ranking?
Yes. So today from um D1 baseball. So this is from D1 baseball. The coaches poll I think comes out later today. You got Tennessee at 1, LSU at 2, Arkansas 3, Georgia 4, Florida State 5, Oregon State 6, Clemson 7, Texas 8, Oregon 9, Oklahoma 10. And then for the rest of the top 25 SEC teams, you got Bama at 12, Florida at 13, Auburn at 20, Ole Miss at 18, and that is it for the SEC teams. Then Troy bounces back into the top 25 at 25. Oh, and then Vandy at 22 as well.
No easy weekends in the SEC.
None.
And as we
None.
continue to rock and roll as the season goes on, and I hope everybody enjoyed today's show, we're going to continue to, but trust me, as the season goes on in conference play, we're going to be right here bringing you guys the updates of the series and everything else, because the games are only going to get better and better as we're going to have some big matchups this weekend, and they're going to keep on rolling. My man, Zach, I'm Perry. Trust me, I hope you guys have enjoyed it. This was our first time doing SEC baseball here on this platform, but we're going to continue to go through this as you listen. Every team almost damn near in the SEC is in the top 25. How can I not sit back on the weekends and watch some great baseball just like you guys? And so we're going to be sitting back watching these games, attending these games, and looking at them. I was at the LSU Missouri game over the weekend, had a chance to be amongst the Tigers over at Alex Box Stadium, and then seeing Missouri as I'm good friends with Coach Kerry Jackson, as he used to coach at Southern University in Baton Rouge as well. So I'm going to be checking out that game this week against Texas for the Tigers, as I'm sure plenty of bars are going to be packed out of everybody, as we know, in South Louisiana, enjoying themselves and watching. But I hope you guys have enjoyed yourself watching us as we get things kicked off in SEC conference play with the series, first weekend series. We'll be back next week. And I think this might be the perfect spot for us on Mondays. What you think, Blue?
Yeah. Mondays will work for me, man. If Mondays are good for you.
Mondays are good for me. We were initially teetering this thing, maybe doing Sunday with that last game of the series, but this will give us a better opportunity to wrap up things with the entire series wrapped up, some rankings out, and give us an opportunity to recap the entire weekend for you guys, as I know you love your teams, you love your conference, and you want to know what it looks like, how it went, and we're going to be right here bringing it to you. So my man, Zach McKinnell, hey, I call him Blue, so if you hear me say Blue, you're like, who the hell is he talking to? I'm talking to my boy, Zach. Zach, let everybody know where they can find you and keep up with you, man.
Yeah, the Blue Bloods on all podcast streaming platforms and YouTube, covering FCS football, and then FCS Football Central on si.com/college/FCS. And then here, Monday mornings, man, recapping the SEC baseball weekend.
And I'm Perry White. You guys can follow me. I do the Jaguar Journal on 107.3 FM in Baton Rouge, around the capital city area. So you can tune in. That's on Saturday mornings from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. If you want to keep up with what I do with the Jaguar Journal, you can follow the Jaguar Journal across all social media, as well as you can subscribe to the YouTube channel, the Jaguar Journal. And then right here on the Yard Network, this is our thing that we got rocking and rolling. You can follow us on the Yard across all social media, X, Facebook, Twitter. What that is, X and Instagram. You know, that Twitter and X, I keep thinking it's two different things, Blue, in my head, but I got to remember it's all the same. And as well as you can follow, hit the subscribe button on the Yard Network on YouTube as well. So I appreciate all of you guys out there tuning in. I hope you have a great rest of the week. I thank you guys. Hey, Blue, man, Appreciate you, man, coming on, man. We're going to do this each and every week. You can tune in next Monday. We're going to try to do this every Monday at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time, recapping the SEC, giving you top 25, and looking at midweek games across the conference of the SEC. And at any time anybody wants to chime in and talk with us, hey, comment in the comment section. We're very open to the ideas or comments from everybody. And if you got a question about your team, don't hesitate to ask. So for everybody out there, from myself, Perry White, and my man, Zach McKinnell, I appreciate you guys, man. We'll see you next week. Have a good week, all right?